Hello, MCU fans. Today we're going to take a look at the question of will the MCU be rebooted after Secret Wars? Now, I've heard this question coming up a lot recently because, well, Phase 4 has been pretty massive, and it's left people wondering, can new fans join the MCU easily, or are they intimidated by all of the movies and TV shows that they theoretically have to watch before they can start with new movies? It's a good question. So maybe Secret Wars will be a chance to address that. Maybe there'll be a reboot. But if so, how would it be rebooted? What would that look like? So there is a lot to unpack here. Let's dive right in and see what we can find out. Okay, so it's always important to understand the terms that we're using. What does reboot mean? And is it a soft reboot versus a hard reboot? So both of those terms originated, not surprisingly, with computer technology in the early 1970s. So a hard reboot is an action in which the power to the computer is physically turned off and back on again, causing an initial boot of the machine, also known as a cold reboot. So simply said, we're starting over. We're turning it all the way off, shutting off the power, turning off the lights, and then turning them back on again. Versus a soft reboot. That's an action in which the computer is restarted without shutting it all the way down and turning the power off. It's also known as a warm reboot. So in this case, you get the benefit of the reboot without having to have the power shut off, and basically you don't have to start all the way over again. Makes a lot of sense, right? So now let's look at how this soft and hard reboot has been handled in the comics over the years, and that will lead into how we may see it handled in the MCU during Secret Wars. So the best example of a hard reboot would be Crisis on Infinite Earths. This was DC's maxi series back in 1985. It had been 50 years since the beginning of the DC universe in 1935. And by this time, there were multiple worlds, multiple universes, multiple character versions, several Supermen, several Flashes, etc. In fact, it's kind of like DC is even today with creating multiple Batmans and multiple Supermen. History repeats itself, right? But yeah, it was very confusing. And plus you had 50 years of history. So a very, very convoluted at times, confusing, just dense history. So Crisis on Infinite Earths solved all of that by collapsing everything down to one Earth, one timeline, and doing a hard reboot and starting over. So there was all kinds of craziness along the way, all kinds of shockers. I mean, Supergirl gets killed. What on earth? Flash gets killed, Barry Allen's Flash. So some major league deaths. And then finally at the end, again, you have a complete collapse of the multiverse, one universe left, and a hard reboot. So if you picked up the comics after Crisis on Infinite Earths, Batman, hey, it kept the numbering, right? 404, but Batman Year One. It was a start over, and you had to learn, who is this new Batman? What's his new history? Superman actually started over with issue number 1. Oh my goodness. So yeah, if you bought this one, you owned Superman number 1. Not quite as valuable as the original Superman number 1, but hey, still, it's a number 1. But major change. He was never Superboy in this new timeline, in this new universe. So, wow. He didn't become Superman until he was an adult. Goodness gracious. And then you got the new Wonder Woman, issue number 1, new story. And the new Justice League, issue number 1, new story. So yeah, if you're a fan, this is the dream come true. If you're a new fan, I should say, this is a dream come true. Because you can pick up on DC at ground zero, right where it started. You don't have to know anything before, because these are the beginning of these stories. That's awesome, right? However, if you're a longtime fan, sure, you probably found these interesting and they were good reading, really good reading. But what do you do with all your old issues? This is the last issue of Action Comics and the last issue of Wonder Woman before Crisis on Infinite Earths rewrote everything. Is there any point in having these anymore? Do you just throw them away now? Well, no, I can answer that. Don't throw them away, sell them. but still, the question is, do the stories mean anything? Kind of, you could argue no, because it's all been rewritten. So all this rich history gone. So you could imagine as a long-term fan, you might be a little insulted by this, that everything you've grown up being a part of doesn't have any meaning anymore. Interesting. So we see the value of a hard reboot for the new fans, but we see, maybe a big issue for the long-term fans. You may have a bunch that just say, forget it, I'm done. All right, so that's hard reboot. Now let's look at soft reboot. I think the best example of a soft reboot in the comics is the 2015 Secret Wars, which will obviously heavily influence the MCU's Secret Wars. But before we get to 2015's Secret Wars, I want to take a diversion down and look at the 1984 Secret Wars. There's actually been 2 Secret Wars in the comics. Let's take a look at that because I actually think that may influence the MCU's Secret Wars as well. So, first of all, you may say, why are you showing me the covers of Spider-Man 251 and Marvel Team-Up 140? Well, because I love Spider-Man, first of all. But more importantly is to point out, right before Secret Wars, you see everything looks normal, right? He's got his red and blue costume. Life is normal. Life is great. And at the end of these issues, as well as at the end of every issue of any superhero that appeared in Secret Wars, they came upon this giant device in Central Park. As Spider-Man says, what is it? Well, he swings into it, has to check it out, right? Curiosity killed the cat. He jumps in, and poof, he's gone. And we learn to be continued in Marvel Superheroes Secret Wars #1. Now, eventually, we will learn that this device was created by a being called the Beyonder, who was basically created for Secret Wars. And the Beyonder is an all-powerful being who just wanted to watch good and evil play itself out on Battleworld. But obviously, you got to read. You'd have to read Secret Wars to see that. But let's just say, for the minute, somebody said, "Okay, this is just Marvel trying to get me to buy another comic. I'm not going to get it. Let other people read it. I'll pick it up later, right?" Instead, I'm going to grab the next issue of Spider-Man and just move on. And then you're like, what? What is this? Where did this black costume come from? Now, at the beginning of issue 252, which was right after the previous issue where he vanished, he returns from that device, and we learn it's only been a week. However, it will take a year for all of Secret Wars to come out over 12 months. So, man, if nothing else is going to get you to read Secret Wars, this is, right? You're like, where did he get this costume? And then other big changes. Fantastic Four. They come out of that big device, and Ben Grimm's gone. There's no Thing. Instead, it's She-Hulk, who now joins the Fantastic Four. Craziness. Brilliant marketing by Marvel. I mean, honestly, if for some reason somebody wasn't reading Secret Wars, now they are, because they're like, I got to figure out what's going on. And boy, if you read it, were you ever in for a treat? As you can see from the issue on the left, it showed all the heroes there, and on the right, all the villains. It was basically take all your action figures and have a giant battle on throw them in a pile and just duke it out to the end. Because again, the Beyonder wanted to see how good and evil all play itself out. So maybe this was just to sell action comics or action figures in the long run, because it kind of was. This was Marvel's way of making you buy a bunch of toys. But really, there were significant things that happened. Obviously, Spider-Man got his costume. And note that this is not Venom at this point. That's way down the road. This is just the symbiote trying to bond with Spider-Man. And of course, it tries to take him over, which then in his regular comic, which was still running, mind you, going forward, now we're at issue 258, Sure enough, that costume tries to take him over. He runs to the Fantastic Four. They end up shooting it with some sonic waves, get the costume off of him, and there's poor Peter Parker in his whitey tighties. Really? Really, Peter? Whitey tighties? Come on, man. But anyway, and so Johnny Storm gives him the Fantastic Four outfit with a bag over his head to keep his identity, and of course we get the bombastic Bagman, who we will also see in Across the Spider-Verse. We've seen him already in the trailers. But more importantly, I think this may be an indication that little drop of goo, remember it from the end of No Way Home, we may not see that bond with Spider-Man until Secret Wars. I kind of thought it would show up in Spider-Man 4, but I'm beginning to wonder now if maybe Feige is taking a cue from the comics and saying, nope, we don't get the black costume until Secret Wars, and it'll be a different story in Spider-Man 4. But anyway, the comic continued on, and of course, Dr. Doom, it's always Dr. Doom, he manages to steal the power of the Beyonder and basically is all-powerful, but ultimately is defeated with the help of Molecule Man, of all things. So yeah, great series. If you've never read it, it's definitely worth checking it out. Really, really cool. All right, so now that's the first Secret Wars from 1984. Now let's talk about the 2015 Secret Wars, which I think will even more heavily influence the MCU. However, to fully understand it, we have to take a short road trip through the Ultimates universe. So the Ultimates were created in the year 2000, late 1999, and it was basically a different universe, which now could start over with a brand new chronology. So for new fans, it was a way to pick up and learn about Spider-Man, learn about the Avengers and new storylines with them with no past history, mind you. Fantastic Four, again, brand new. You could start from scratch with Fantastic Four, and that's where we were introduced to Miles Morales also in the Ultimates. So you basically had two sets of comics, two universes coming out at the same time. The regular universe dating all the way back to the history of the beginning of Marvel Comics in the 60s, and you have the Ultimates. Well, by about 2015, 2014, people were kind of wondering if the Ultimates were better than the regular comics. They were almost more popular. So Marvel realized they had to do something, or at least that's my theory as to why they did this next series called Time Runs Out. And in this series, we basically had an incursion. We all know that word, right? We had an incursion between the main comics universe and the Ultimates universe. And sure enough, that led into Secret Wars. Now, here we see, the throwdown of all the characters, right? Only this time, it's not so much the heroes versus the villains. It's regular comics universe versus the Ultimates universe. Wild, huh? In fact, they had one of the pages in the comic just showed you everybody on each universe. You have all of the Earth 616, which, by the way, it's worth mentioning at that point, because you may be going, 616, I've heard that before. You might see why longtime comic fans do not like that the MCU is named 616, because that's what the main comic universe was called. So it's a little confusing, I guess, that they did that. But it is what it is. Marvel did it, and so whatever. But don't be confused. This does not mean the MCU's 616. This is the comics 616. And notice the Illuminati. There's a version of the Illuminati there in the upper left-hand corner. And then we have Earth 1610. That's the Ultimate Universe. And there's our Spider-Man, right? We have the original Spider-Man, who's been around forever, and we have Miles Morales' version of Spider-Man from the Ultimates universe. So what ends up happening? Well, once again, Dr. Doom, it's always Dr. Doom, steals the power from the Beyonders to actually prevent the incursion, to solve the problem of all the universes being destroyed, and instead he creates a new universe called Battleworld. And in it, notice there's several different things a lot going on here, but notice number 20 in the center, which is broken out in the lower left-hand corner. It's Manhattan, and it has Earth 616, the main Marvel universe, and Earth 1610 together as one universe combined. So this was his solution to stop the incursions. But this is also the way they manage their soft reboot. So all kinds of things happen. If I were to go into all the details of it, it would be an entire video on its own. I mean, there was insanity. You end up at one point with T'Challa with the Infinity Gauntlet on his hand. I mean, so much going on. But at the end of the day, obviously, Dr. Doom is defeated, once again with the help of Molecule Man, kind of a throwback there to the 1984 Secret Wars. And at the end, you have one universe, but here's where your soft reboot comes in. Now Miles Morales and Spider-Man are in the same universe. But it's a soft reboot because this is the same Spider-Man that's been around since the 60s. And the same Miles Morales that's been around since 2000, but they're now combined into one universe. So you see where this may really be leading into how Marvel may handle the MCU's version of Secret Wars. In fact, let's look at all the little hints Marvel's given us so far that they're going in this type of direction. First of all, Endgame and Loki have shown us several ways we can get variants. In Endgame, Loki and Gamora both became variants because of the time travel, creating branches. But then in Loki, we learned you can have just tons of Lokis from different universes, and that they've all been thrown into the void because of creating Nexus events. So this idea of multiple universes and multiple variants clearly established through Endgame and Loki. Also, at the end of Loki, the death of He Who Remains created the multiverse. Now, I'm going to clarify something, because I have said that before, and I've gotten comments saying, hey, the multiverse existed before, and people are right. So let me be clear. The multiverse before He Who Remains, because here's the sacred timeline, right? It did exist. In fact, you can see multiple universes there. It's not one strand. It's like several strands, but they're tightly knit together there. That's where I think the Sony universes, for example, Toby's and Andrew's universes existed. So how were they able to exist without creating Nexus events? I don't know, other than they didn't. Basically, there was no reason to prune them because they didn't create another Kang. So why they didn't create a Kang, that we don't know. But it's pretty clear that even when He Who Remains was alive, we did have the multiverse. However, when he died, That's when it went nuts. Now you've got your Nexus events. You've got the creation of different Kangs. You've got the basically untold number of universes, which we then saw in What If. So I just want to be clear on that. Sorry that I have confused things by saying created the multiverse, because technically it was always been around. It just was not chaos, right? So because of that, then spells like the No Way Home memory spell opened that multiverse, allowing some of the Spider-Man to come to our universe, to 616, allowing the villains to come to 616. And it would have created, real catastrophe if they hadn't undone the spell, if you will, fixed it. Then Multiverse of Madness brought us even more variants, several Doctor Strange variants. The Illuminati, which remember the Illuminati were part of Secret Wars, but it brought us an Illuminati from a different universe, 838, who were all variants. It brought us crazy universes, the Paint Universe. I need more Paint Universe in my life. Give me more Paint Universe, Marvel. And then it also brought us incursions. We learned how when two universes collide for various reasons, they gave several reasons it could happen, dreamwalking being one of them, certainly. But when universes collide, one or both are completely destroyed. And we learned that Doctor Strange and his freaky deaky third eye also created an incursion on his own. So he and Clea have to go fix that. So you can see lots of things are similar to that Secret Wars 2015 storyline and are building towards the MCU having many similarities. So let's get down to it then. What will happen in Secret Wars? So up to this point, I've basically just done a summary of what we already know. Now we're going to move into theories. I'm sure people will not agree with all of these, and that is fine. Leave it in the comments. Tell me if I got it completely wrong, or if you think there's other ways it could work, or if you think I got some of these right. Again, they're all just theories. So let's look at the big question, right? Will we get a reboot? Okay, so for the minute, let's talk about DC, because they have shown this tendency to keep doing hard reboots, both in the TV world, where they had multiple universes even in the TV world. How did they end up with multiple universes in the TV world? But they did. And so we ended up with a Crisis on Infinite Earths that resolved that. And in the movie universe, James Gunn, thy name is hard reboot, right? James Gunn. Poor guy had to come in and be the bad guy to fire all of the original crew and basically finish the Snyderverse off and flush it down the drain. I don't know why it keeps happening with DC, but it does. That's 2 times they've had to reboot both the TV universe and the movie universe. Marvel, on the other hand, hasn't really done these type of hard reboots. Maybe it's because they're, proud of their IP and they want to find some way to keep it around. I don't know. But in the comics, they didn't do it with Secret Wars, and I don't think Feige's going to do it again. I cannot imagine Feige saying, nope, I'm good with just getting rid of everything I did. All my work. No, it's gone. Get rid of it. Nope. There's no way. So will we get a reboot? Yes, but it's going to be a soft reboot. It's going to be a soft reboot because I just don't see Feige going the hard reboot route. Okay, great. That's part of an answer to the question. But now how will that soft reboot look? Okay, let's look at this big question. Can it address the MCU being too massive for new fans? Because, that is a problem. It is a problem that's only going to get worse as we move through more phases. Okay, well, let's really break this down with numbers, first of all. Let's look at each phase and the movie total runtimes. And these are from IMDb, so they do include ending credits, not just the end credit scenes, but the actual credits, which I never watched, obviously, the credits themselves, so it would be a little less if you took that out. But nonetheless, from IMDb, so phase 1, 12 hours. Phase 2, basically 12 and a half hours. Phase 3, 24 hours. Phase 4, 16 hours. So actually less hours from a movie-only standpoint than phase 3. But then again, look at the lengths of the phases. Phase 1 was 5 years. Phase 2 was 3 years. Phase 3 was 4 years. And phase 4 was only 2 years. So in 2 years, we got 16 hours. So technically, we actually got more per year in phase 4. But again, this is just the movies. That's just the movies. Now, let's throw in the TV shows. You throw in Disney Plus TV shows, 42 hours and 44 minutes. And again, this includes the end credits to be consistent with the movies. So it's going to be less if you didn't watch all the end credits, because we know there's a lot of credits. But still, 42 hours and 44 minutes for the shows, meaning Phase 4, over a 2-year span, gave us a total of 59 hours of content. Oh my word. It really is massive when you think about it that way. So from a movie standpoint, the total movie runtime, just movies, 66 hours or 2.76 days. But then you throw in the Disney Plus shows with all the movies, 108 hours, 4.54 days. That is a lot when you think about it. I mean, 4.54 days. But consider too, this doesn't even include the Netflix shows or the Sony Spider-Verse. I mean, you could argue at least Daredevil you should watch all 3 seasons, maybe Defenders. And the Sonyverse, you should watch all 3 Tobys, the 2 Andrews, maybe the 2 Venoms, maybe Morbius. I guess. I'm not going to recommend it, but you can. If you want to, you can watch Morbius. Add all that in. Oh my goodness. That is a lot of prep work. I will say though, I would pay good money to have my mind wiped so I could experience them all again. I would gladly spend 4.54 days watching them for the first time. So I think sometimes we overdo how much we think new fans are going to be intimidated by this. Yes, they're going to be intimidated until they start to watch it and go, oh my gosh, this stuff is so good. I want to watch everything. And then they're going to turn around and love binge watching this. So it is still an issue, though. There's no doubt that if you just look on paper and you see that 4.54 days of homework, if you will, that you got to watch, that's a little intimidating. So let's look at how maybe Phase 4 tried to address this for new fans. So everything on the left is stuff that you had to have history to watch. You had to watch something before it. You couldn't come in clean. Maybe it's the previous movie in the trilogy, or maybe it's something. But in particular, Endgame. Look at Endgame. Endgame had 5 TV shows or movies that directly pick up storylines from it. So I know a lot of people say, "Oh, everything was done after Endgame." No, there was a lot of open plot points. But anyway, so everything on the left there is stuff that you need something to watch something before you can watch it. But I will give Marvel credit. There was at least 6 things, TV shows and movies, that you could pretty much watch with zero history. You didn't have to watch anything before it, and you could still enjoy it. Now, you could argue Eternals did pick up from Endgame, because it did, but someone could give you a 30-second summary of Endgame of just Thanos wiped out half the universe. Okay, great. Now I can watch Eternals. So really, we got 6 origin stories that were very contained. That's awesome. But yeah, 12 of the things in Phase 4, you had to have watched something prior. Phase 5 isn't going to get any better. I would argue on the left, everything there is either part of a trilogy or, picking up after Endgame, or, you have to watch something before you could pick it up. Versus on the right, Echo, Ironheart, hopefully we get a Man-Thing. That's the rumor. Man-Thing's a special presentation, and then Blade. Those 4 you probably don't have to watch a lot to pick up, but even Echo, you technically should watch Hawkeye. Ironheart, you should watch Wakanda Forever. Man-Thing, you should watch Werewolf by Night. Really only Blade, assuming that it is a prequel movie and an origin story. That might be the only thing in Phase 5 that a new fan could watch without seeing anything. How do we address this? Because it's only going to get even worse in Phase 6. Well, I think we forget how important legends for new fans. I mean, for us longtime fans, I watched them all, yes, but I didn't need to because I knew all that. But for new fans, it really is a perfect onboarding to know everything you need to know before you then watch a certain movie or a certain TV show. So I actually think Legends is going to become even more important going into Phase 5 and to Phase 6 and to Phase 7. They may need to expand on these a bit, but this is a great primer so that somebody can go, okay, I'm actually caught up and can watch whatever, the next, watch Echo or whatever. But it also tells you the movies to go watch if you want to see what you missed. So they're perfect. So back to this question. Can Secret Wars address the MCU being so massive? Well, there's 2 things. Number 1, I think it needs to wrap up as many storylines as it can. Endgame had 6 open plot points, major open plot points. I don't know that they need to do that again. Try to wrap up as much as they can, and then we need to make Legends even more relevant so that new fans can feel like, hey, I can watch this and get caught up. So I think we can address that. On the flip side, I couldn't believe I started hearing this from several fans that Phase 4 started to feel like homework, even for longtime fans. Forget new fans. These are longtime fans because they felt like I got to watch everything. If I don't watch, poor She-Hulk gets picked on, but let's pick on it some more. I don't want to watch She-Hulk. I don't like it, but I need to watch it or I won't be in on all the inside jokes, when Secret Wars comes or whatever. So it felt for some people like homework. Now, I would argue, first of all, if you don't want to watch She-Hulk, for example, don't watch it. Just read the summary somewhere or go watch a YouTube summary of it. It'll have all the Easter eggs. It'll have everything you need to know. But really, this idea that it was so much content, I don't buy it. Let's go back to these numbers again. We're just looking at Phase 4 here. Phase 4 movies, Disney Plus shows, and then everything combined. Notice it was 3,540 total minutes. That's if you watched everything in Phase 4. Okay. How much per week, though, was this really? All right, so we got to divide by 2 because it's over 2 years, and then divide by 52 because there's 52 weeks. What do you get? 34 minutes per week. Just 34 minutes per week. That's all the time that someone had to put in for their quote-unquote homework. Now, some weeks it was more because a movie came out. Some weeks it was 0 because there was nothing. But 34 weeks on the average with the MCU, I am totally fine with that. That is not too much. Now, the quality needs to be better. I'm sure some people are immediately going to say, yeah, but the quality was bad. I don't disagree. There were issues with quality, sometimes in the story, sometimes in the CGI, etc. No, that's got to be fixed. I want good quality. I'm just saying 34 minutes a week ain't that much. So back to this question then. Did watching each entry of Phase 4 feel like homework? Well, you know who it felt like homework to? The YouTubers that created content for a living. Yes, they might have felt like, man, this is so much work. But you know what? For the average fan, no. 34 minutes, I'm sorry, I don't buy it. If you can't put in 34 minutes a week for the MCU, then you don't care about comics or the MCU. And that's fine. If you're not that interested in it, it's no offense. That's fine. For me, I would take 2 times that. I would take an hour a week, 2 hours a week. But anyway, I don't really buy this whole Phase 4 had too much content. Make the quality better, yes, but the content level was fine. All right, this is a good question. Does MCU need an Iron Man, a Captain America, a Black Widow, and a Black Panther? The first 3, obviously, we lost in Endgame, and then Black Panther, through the tragic death of Chadwick Boseman, we lost him as well. Those are 4 very marketable characters. And when you start to think about action figures and you think about the amusement parks, etc., is that too much of a loss that Disney needs to replace them? Well, okay, let's look at this a little more. First of all, let's start with all of the either fallen or just OG gangsters, OG Avengers rather, sorry. They all have a prodigy. Marvel has got all of them set up with someone else. So we've got Ironheart, Hercules, Scar, Sam Wilson is the new Captain America, the new Hawkeye, Kate Bishop, Yelena, and Shuri. So we kind of do have all of the OG Avengers. We just have them in new form. I'm okay with that. And I know, particularly with Hulk, you may be saying, Scar, give him a chance, give him a chance. But also, you could argue in some cases there's even alternative prodigy. With Thor, maybe you have Love. Maybe if Mighty Thor comes back. With Hulk, maybe She-Hulk. With Captain America, in addition to the Sam Wilson, the new Captain America, we got U.S. Agent. And of course, we got T'Challa Jr., who down the line, or maybe through some sort of time jump, shenanigan, they age him up. We have a new Black Panther. So I would actually argue we do have all these characters. We just have them in new form. That's just the way things happen over time. But still, if the feeling is, no, we need a Thor, we need a Captain America, we need a Black Widow, we need a Black Panther, okay, then you know what's interesting? One of the things that can happen in Secret Wars is, while replacements do already exist, we've seen that, the Prodigy, variants could be brought in the same way that we saw in the 2015 Secret Wars comic we brought Miles Morales in. Well, they could bring in a new actor, the new Iron Man, into the main 616 as part of Secret Wars. Now, I don't know that I feel that's necessary, and I actually think it's risky because, we're always going to be comparing them to Robert Downey Jr. for Iron Man or Chris Evans, or Scarlett Johansson, etc., Chadwick Boseman. So I'm not voting for that. I would rather it doesn't happen. But still, it's interesting that Secret Wars is a chance to do that if it's desired. So let me know in the comments. Do you think we should pull in some new versions of the heroes that are gone? Good question. So how does the MCU bring in the X-Men? That's a big question. I think we're all kind of sensing we are not going to get the X-Men until after Secret Wars. But will Secret Wars be how we get the X-Men? Yes, I know we've seen some mutants showing up. We've seen Namor. We've seen Miss Marvel. We've seen some characters in She-Hulk, Mr. Immortal, etc. But how will we get the OG X-Men, the main team? Well, first of all, let's look at the fact that I think as part of Secret Wars, we may see some of our favorites come back for one last run. We may see a variant of Iron Man that looks like Robert Downey Jr., a variant of Captain America that looks like Chris Evans. In other words, letting them play the part one last time. I do not think they'll be folded into the 616 after Secret Wars. I hate to see them die again, though, so I don't know what'll happen to them, because please don't bring them back and then kill them again. But it would be fun to see them suit up again. I'm bringing that up just to say that, yeah, we may see some variants of some of our favorite characters. We may therefore see some variants of the other universes. We may see some of the Fantastic Four, the two iterations of them. We may see Nick Cage as Ghost Rider. We may see Wesley Snipes as Blade. And yes, that is Ryan Reynolds over to his right. So it'd be interesting to see him coming back as a couple characters, I guess. And Chris Evans, of course, was in the Fantastic Four in the upper left. Now, who knows whether in Deadpool he ends up killing half the Fox universe in the process. But assuming they don't get killed, they may show up in Secret Wars. That would be really cool. We know we're going to see Deadpool, but we don't know when he'll be officially part of 616, because Deadpool 3 may be getting him closer, but not necessarily in yet. We'll see. But we know we are going to get Deadpool and several of his cast coming in. It would be a great chance to see the original X-Men. Now, we know Hugh Jackman is going to be a Deadpool 3, but what about Storm and Cyclops and another version of Professor X for them to kill? Goodness. And Jean Grey, etc. So it'd be nice to see some cameos from this group. But back to the original question, how do we get the X-Men? Well, if the first class X-Men, that crew, McAvoy and Fassbender, etc., if they still want to be X-Men, I would be fine with that. They're not too old. And there were some great versions of Storm introduced, and Nightcrawler, Beast, etc. And of course, Evan Peter as Quicksilver. So I'd be fine with that. And this might be a way for them, similar to how Miles Morales was folded in the 2015 Secret Wars, this might be a way to fold in the X-Men, that after Secret Wars, they get pulled from some other universe, and however they avoid an incursion, that'll have to be explained, we get our new X-Men. It also could be a way to bring in brand new faces we've never seen for the X-Men. So I'm beginning to wonder if the question of how do we bring the X-Men in is we get them folded in from Secret Wars. Because I just don't see how they're going to explain how they've been hidden away, all this time. I've heard rumors of Professor X put a spell on everyone, mental, not a spell, sorry, but, uses as mental powers to make everyone forget the X-Men existed. Okay, I'll accept that. That's a way to have them always have been in 616. But I'm just throwing out that Secret Wars is this once-in-a-lifetime chance for the MCU to bring in characters from other universes. All right. Speaking of, might this be how we finally get Norman Osborn? We really need a Norman Osborn. He's so important in the comics. He's just done so much, and his stories are so rich and deep. But obviously, we had him in Toby's universe, and we kind of had him in Andrew's universe. So how do we get him in the main 616? Well, I'm going to throw out that it's awfully interesting that Spider-Man Freshman Year has now been revealed to be an alternate universe. Obviously, because Norman Osborn is in it, and he becomes the mentor to Peter. We see all these villains that are not in our universe. Now, Daredevil wearing a different costume, but also played by Charlie Cox. That's kind of interesting. And then Doctor Strange, all appearing in this universe, in the Spider-Man freshman year universe. What if some of these characters get folded in to the main 616 as a result of Secret Wars? So literally, we get this chance, kind of like Miles Morales, how we were introduced to Miles Morales in the Ultimates, and then he ends up in the main universe in the comics. This is our introduction through freshman year, maybe sophomore year of these characters, and they eventually come across in Secret Wars. I don't know, just throwing out ideas, but I think that would be really interesting. And I'll tell you what gave me the idea is when I did the video on the amusement park rides, in which they involve a multiversal battle, if you will, against King Thanos, which no, I don't think King Thanos will appear in Secret Wars. But still, look over on the left there. That is clearly the Spider-Man freshman year Spider-Man. So if he's appearing in a multiverse ride, why not also have him appear in Secret Wars and maybe end up coming into 616? And now I'm going to throw out a crazy idea, which will probably get people yelling at me in the comments. I'm not saying I want this to happen. I'm just throwing out this idea. What if this is where we do a swap with Sony? And as a result of Secret Wars, we don't have like all the multiverse destroyed. Instead, we go back to the original multiverse where I do think the Toby and the Andrew Sony universes existed. So I think they can coexist with 616. So somehow at the end, we go back to just the regular universes, but Tom Holland ends up going over to Sony. And our Spider-Man ends up becoming the Spider-Man freshman year Spider-Man. Wouldn't that be wild? No, I'm not saying I want that to happen. I love Tom Holland. But let's be honest, he's getting really expensive. He's worth every penny of it, but he's getting really expensive. This might be a way for Marvel to go, or Disney to go, hey, Sony, you can pay his salary. We're going to bring in a new Spider-Man. But that would all hinge on whether or not we like the Spider-Man from Spider-Man freshman year. If he's not done well and he's not interesting, we wouldn't want that. But still, I'm just throwing out a crazy idea. Again, don't yell at me. But could happen. You never know. All right, bottom line, how might the MCU bring in Norman Osborn? I would argue that some of the Spider-Man villains from freshman year may be folded in. That's the whole point of the Spider-Man freshman, sophomore year, etc., is to introduce those villains and get them into 616. Whew, okay, there you go. This is how I think we might see Secret Wars play out from what type of reboot we get and to how that will flesh itself out in all these different questions. Let me know what you think in the comments. Lots of things here. I'm sure you've got opinions. I want to hear them all. And then also, if you don't mind, subscribe if you haven't already. Like this video. You can check out more content, and we can all continue to enjoy the ever-expanding, ever-growing, ever-crazy, Secret Wars-filled Marvel Cinematic Universe.